Brian, Brendan Chin. I've been a fan from the beginning. I'll be a fan until the end. Question. Even though most of us real fans don't care and will ride until we die, that's why we did this Patreon. What do you guys believe is the reason for the decreased numbers in viewership? Ooh, good question. Question for Shab. When do you address the lawsuit against you for tax fraud and conspiracy? Yeah, I don't address this stuff, but I mean, here I can. When can we see Bobby Lee make an appearance on The Fighter and the Kid again? Great question, brother.
Just when you thought Brendan the business shark Schaub couldn't embarrass himself anymore, he starts a Patreon. Now, if you're not up to speed on the latest iteration of Joe Rogan's pet project gone wrong, here is the quick background. Earlier this year, Brendan followed Bryan Callen to Texas to revamp their failing careers in the aftermath of the LA fires. Bryan hit the ground running, moving before Schaub, getting a regular spot at the comedy mothership and taking chopper rides with his buddy, while Brendan was forced to sell his Calabasas mansion at a discount before heading down south himself. And while Bryan's thriving in the Lone Star State, Brendan's just alone in a storage unit, answering questions from his hardcore fans on Patreon. But little does he know, the ones asking the questions are homeless cats. And wait for it, the guy who Brendan tried to sue for exposing his infidelity and lost. I'll explain what's going on there in a moment. Like I've said 1,000 times, you couldn't make this shit up if you tried. Brendan thought this would be a safe place away from the trolls on Reddit and YouTube, not realizing that he'll never be able to hide from criticism until he finally hangs up the mic and becomes a personal trainer. But basically, Brendan's last-ditch effort to save the Thick Boy Empire from its inevitable violent implosion was to start a Patreon like 10 fucking years too late. The thing is though, your boy Bupper can't even get people to watch this shit for free. The Thick Boy Brains Trust has completely run out of ideas. The car channel is dead in the water, the Schaub show has turned into low-energy baseball dad ramblings, and The Fighter and the Kid will soon be studied by psychologists as part of one of the longest, most comprehensive studies into the degenerative disease known as CTE, or as Brendan likes to call it, CT, as in drinking tea in the sea. Yeah, I don't know, guys. And so now, armed with their 3.5 followers on Patreon and the other 15 who are there just for the laughs, Brendan has resorted to doing Q&A storage unit sessions, and the questions are amazing.
Hi, Brian, Brendan Chin. I've been a fan from the beginning. I'll be a fan until the end. Question. This question goes to all three of you. The both of us, Jen. Even though most of us real fans don't care and will ride until we die, that's why we did this Patreon. What do you guys believe is the reason for the decreased numbers in viewership? Ooh, good question. Boy, I think it's a number of things. I would say podcast. When our numbers were at its biggest, there wasn't as much competition. So now everyone has their podcast. So that's a reason. Two, a number of things that happened with, like Brian being out for 2 years wrecked the podcast, getting falsely accused of that bullshit. You know, so I had to do the podcast without him for 2 years with people you guys really don't know. That was kind of the start of our demise. The Bobby stuff hurt us. I think that made a lot of people upset. Our talk about COVID with the suppression of YouTube, that does it. False flagging from haters causes issues. And then the lack of guest. I think that covers it all. Would you agree, Chin?
Pretty much.
Yeah. Good question, Dukes of Apollo. What do you guys think it is? Let me know.
Oh yeah, that's a damn good question. If they have an idea of what it might have been, or how many different things it might have been.
Absolutely, Chin. Listen up. That was actually a pretty good attempt from your boy right there, bringing up some key issues from over the years that I honestly can't disagree with. The only bit that Brendan left out was the part where he finally takes complete ownership and responsibility for being one of the biggest douchebags on the internet. He will never admit it. I've got to give it to him, though, for a guy with the clearest case of CT I've ever seen, his ability to pull out the mental gymnastics and avoid any semblance of self-reflection reflection and improvement is elite level. The part that he'll never admit is that he was so convinced that he was going to be the next Dwayne Johnson that he kept pushing back against the backlash. So when comedians and comedy fans went after him for jumping the queue and coming out with his Showtime special, You'd Be Surprised, followed by the now infamous Gringo Puppy 3 years later, without a shred of comedic talent, instead of listening to the internet and staying in his lane, he pushed back against them and mistakenly labeled them as jealous haters. He literally used to lash out at his so-called haters for being out of shape, ugly losers with nothing going for them. They don't matter. Nobody cares what they think. And now his media career is basically over. How'd that go for you, B? Now, personally, you know I blame Joe Rogan. He's the one who openly used to defend Brendan earlier on and gave him the idea that people hate him because he's big, strong, and good-looking and funny. But at some point, a grown man's got to take responsibility for his own actions. Just like Brian Callen had... No, wait, that's wrong. Sorry, guys, typo. What I meant to say was...
I have a very close friend, my best friend, who's falsely confused.
But like he just admitted there, the Bobby Lee situation was also a seminal moment in Brendan's downfall, and one absolute legend on Patreon asked him about it.
Jason, when can we see Bobby Lee make an appearance on The Fighter and the Kid again? Great question, brother. I don't have a problem with Bobby. I don't have a relationship with him either. I think that's more of a Brian thing because Brian's still in the comedy scene and he's going to the mothership. And I think Bobby's there sometimes. So Brian would see him. Brian says they're cool. Me and Bobby haven't spoke in a hot second. I have no ill will towards him. One of the worst mistakes the Fighter Kids ever made. I'd love to have him on. We don't do a ton of guests. I'm just not in that world anymore. I don't know if you realize this, but Brian really doesn't book guests. Even though he's in the comedy scene, it's just not in his nature to ask people to come on the show. So unless I go down to the mothership and start asking guys to be on the show, it's probably not going to happen. I just don't have time, especially at night with my kiddos' sports, to go down there. So I don't know. Bobby would have to run into Brian, and Brian and him would have to come to some agreement. But we'd love to have him on. He's literally one of the funniest guys in the world. You know, I have no ill will towards Bobby at all, and he's crushing it.
Haven't these guys ever heard of a fucking phone? How did a simple question about getting Bobby Lee back on the podcast turn into a rant about having to go down to the mothership to find guests? Bro, you have the internet on your phone. But this part drives me nuts. Why would Brendan have any ill will towards Bobby Lee? We've heard him say this multiple times before, and I still don't get it. Brendan can't admit that he was the bully in that whole situation. You were the one who fucked up, not Bobby. Brendan tried to hit up Bobby's girlfriend at the time, Kalila, and then when her and her friends exposed him for it on Trash Tuesday and the whole Trug Walk saga came out, Brendan and Brian called and messaged Bobby, threatening to fuck him up if he couldn't keep his girl quiet about the whole thing. So why would Brendan hold any ill will towards Bobby? And he can't even come out and say, I was the one who fucked up. He literally just blamed it on the Fighter and the Kid. He said, one of the worst mistakes the Fighter and the Kids ever made. Bro, your podcast isn't a sentient being. You are. Actually, no, I take that back. Maybe he's right on that one. Okay, I got that out of my system now. Now it's time for Brendan Schaub giving relationship advice.
Don't lose focus on, if you have a good girl, on how hard it is to find a good person in this crazy world we live in. Don't lose focus on that, man. By being selfish, you know, I think for me, for especially the start of my relationship with my wife, even my first kiddo, is as a comic, especially the field I'm in, entertainment, comic, podcasting, being on TV, doing all that. You got to be a bit of almost a narcissist. You got to be kind of selfish. But at the end of the day, it's really not worth it. So you see now, I don't do as much as far as like TV and all that stuff. I still do some stuff. Obviously, I stopped touring because at the end of the day, like even if you achieve whatever you set out to do, you're just lonely, and it comes at a cost, and that cost is the time with your wife, with your girlfriend, with your kiddos, and it's just not worth it. At the end of the day, you're going to realize as you get older, the only people you can trust and the only people that actually want to see you win is your family. So don't kind of isolate them. Don't forget that. Whatever business you're in, whatever journey you're on, make sure you're trying to manage your time and putting time into the family.
The guy asked for relationship advice. Why is Brendan getting into his toxic narcissism and his failed comedy and media careers? Brendan can't answer a fucking question without trauma dumping on his 3.5 hardcore fans. But let me translate the second part of that trauma dump for you. What he's trying to say is, when your career takes a nosedive and you become the most hated man on the internet, one of the side effects is that the Instagram baddies all dry up. So the moral of the story is, don't cheat on your wife, because once you become a lolcow, she's all you'll have left. For now, at least. Honestly, this Q&A format is actually some of the most entertaining content your boys come out with in a while. It's reminiscent of the 1000th episode of The Fighter and the Kid, where he started rage crying about Callan's allegations and told Chin to give him the close-up, but then looked into the wrong camera. We're at a point now where guys like Brendan and Bert Kreischer are commentating on their own downfalls in real time. I mean, this shit is insane. It's like Christmas every week for me over here. And just to top it off, one of Brendan's fake fans asked him about his latest lawsuit, except little did Brendan know the guy asking the question was actually Kyle Swindells, the self-represented YouTuber who Brendan sued for copyright and lost.
Mike, question for Shab. When do you address the lawsuit against you for tax fraud and conspiracy? Yeah, I don't address this stuff, but I mean, here I can. This came out of nowhere. It's a company, a CBD company that I had nothing to do with for years. You're talking about like 5 years. The owner has a litany of issues and legal issues and stuff going against him. And he's been suing these people. There's like 4 or 5 owners. He's been suing them like 6 times with no success. He decided to throw my name into it, obviously to get traction. And yeah, he'll be dealt with. They're dealing with it. And of course, the haters on the internet run with like, oh, tax fraud and conspiracy. There's none of that. I mean, but it sounds juicy, but it's headlines. I get it. Thank God I have a great lawyer who works pro bono. So, and we deal with bullshit like this all the time. I don't talk about it or bring attention to it because it's just bullshit. And that's what they want, But he'll be dealt with. Yeah, I think one article was like, Brendan Schaub getting arrested or going to prison and he's cooking the books. You think my dumbass has access to do tax fraud and conspiracy and cook the books? None of it makes sense. But it's fun for headlines and shit like that. And it just dies down, it goes away, and then somebody else will try some bullshit. It's just how it goes, man, unfortunately.
Imagine being so far up your own ass that you truly believe that, in his own words, he obviously threw my name into it to get traction. If you've been following my extensive coverage of Brendan's latest lawsuit, you'll know there's a legitimate claim of alleged fraud from his former business associate because Brendan indicated and acted like he intended to relinquish his shares in Pure Spectrum CBD, only to then sell them to a Russian-backed private equity company. We're still waiting for the phantom document to appear in Discovery, so your boy isn't out of the woods yet. And for the love of God, can someone please explain to Brendan what fucking pro bono means? Working on a contingency fee basis does not mean pro bono. It's like how Trump still thinks foreign companies and governments pay for American tariffs. Someone's got to get the whiteboard out and draw some diagrams for him or some shit, because he's claimed his lawyers work pro bono several times now, as if it's some kind of flex, when the reality is most civil lawyers offer some sort of no-win, no-fee arrangement. And while we're on the topic of Brendan's delusions and compulsive lies, the shadow banning and false flagging from haters that he mentioned earlier on in the video is one of the biggest copes you'll ever hear from these guys. Maybe during the pro bono lesson, someone can explain to him what false flagging is. I think he means people reporting his videos. But let me ask you this, Mr. Business Shark. If The Fighter and the Kid has been shadow banned for years, then how come every new channel you start seems to fail as well? Yeah, try and fit that into your narrative, you fucking redact. Anyway, that's enough Brendan Schaub slander for today. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.